Before we begin, a quick update. You can now find us on Spotify. Just search for The Sleepy Wizard and you'll find our official page. From now on, we'll be posting new episodes there every single day, and we won't be uploading here anymore. The link is also in the description. See you on Spotify.
The pre-dawn mist clung to the Quidditch pitch like a damp blanket, turning the goalposts into skeletal shadows against the lightening sky. Ginny Weasley hovered at 200 feet, her firebolt humming beneath her, and watched the first fingers of sunlight creep across the Welsh mountains. In an hour, her teammates would arrive. In 2 hours, Coach Gwenog Jones would blow her whistle and the real work would begin. But for now, in these stolen minutes between night and day, the sky belonged to her alone. She leaned forward and shot upward, the cold air stinging her cheeks. Her robes whipped behind her as she climbed, 300 feet, 400, 5, until the training facility below became a collection of tiny buildings scattered across the hillside like a child's toys. At 600 feet, she leveled out and hung there, suspended between earth and heaven, breathing hard. This was why she'd said yes to the Harpies. Not for the gold, though the salary was decent. Not for the fame, though her name had been splashed across the profit often enough since the war ended. She'd said yes because, up here, Tom Riddle's voice couldn't follow her. Foolish girl. Did you really think flying would make you free? Ginny's hands tightened on her broom handle. 3 years since she'd destroyed the diary. 3 years since Voldemort had fallen in the Great Hall and Harry had survived, impossibly, again. 3 years, and still that silky whisper sometimes threaded through her thoughts when she least expected it. She dropped into a sharp dive, tucking her body tight, and pulled up at 50 feet in a maneuver that would have made her old Gryffindor teammates cheer. Her muscles burned pleasantly. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was real. The wind, the speed, the burn in her shoulders. This was her, Ginny Weasley, 20 years old and alive and whole. Not some hollow puppet with ink for blood. Starting without us, Weasley? Ginny twisted on her broom to find Maeve, Callahan rising through the mist below, her dark curls escaping from beneath her practice robes. The veteran chaser grinned as she drew level, barely winded despite having just flown up 600 feet. Couldn't sleep, Ginny said, which was true enough. She'd been awake since 4, staring at her ceiling and trying not to think about the season ahead. 12 matches, 12 chances to prove she belonged here, that she was more than Harry Potter's wife or the girl who'd survived possession by a Dark Lord. Jones'll have your head if you're knackered before practice even starts. Maeve circled her slowly, assessing. You always train this hard. Only when it matters. Fair enough. Maeve jerked her chin toward the eastern horizon, where the sun had finally broken free of the mountains. Come on then, let's get breakfast before the torture begins. The Holyhead Harpies training facility occupied a converted manor house on the outskirts of Abergavenny, its grounds protected by enough privacy charms to keep even the most determined journalists at bay. Inside, the place hummed with purposeful activity. House elves preparing breakfast in the kitchens, team staff reviewing match footage in the strategy room, and in the main hall, 3 women in emerald green Harpies robes arguing cheerfully about the magpie's new keeper. Ginny followed Maeve to the long oak table, where breakfast appeared in steaming dishes. She loaded her plate with eggs and toast, suddenly ravenous. Flying always made her hungry. Weasley, Callahan. Gwenog Jones's voice carried across the hall like a stunning spell. The Harpy's captain and coach strode toward them, still in her sleeping robes, but looking as fierce as if she were fully armored. Her graying hair stuck up in all directions. "Good, you're early. The others will be down in 10 minutes. We've got the season schedule." She slapped a roll of parchment onto the table between them. Ginny's stomach tightened as Maeve unrolled it, breakfast temporarily forgotten. "Opening match against Puddlemere United," Maeve read aloud. "Home pitch, September 1st. That's 3 weeks away." 3 weeks to be match ready, Jones corrected. "Puddlemere's got that new seeker everyone's raving about, and their chasers are solid. We need to be better than solid." Her sharp eyes fixed on Ginny. "That means you, Weasley. I know you've got the talent. Saw you play in school. You were brilliant. But this isn't school anymore. This is professional Quidditch. These women have been playing together for years. You're going to have to earn your place every single day." "Yes, Mom." "Don't ma'am me. I'm not that old." Jones almost smiled. "Call me Coach, or Jones, or Gwenog, if you're brave, but only when you've proved you can keep up." She swept away to harass the beaters, who just stumbled in looking half asleep. Maeve rolled up the schedule and tucked into her eggs. "Don't let her intimidate you," she said quietly. "Jones is tough, but she's fair. If you're good enough, she'll back you. If you're not," she shrugged, "well, you won't last long anyway." "Encouraging," Ginny muttered, but she found herself smiling despite her nerves. The rest of the team filtered in over the next 10 minutes. Rhiannon Davies, the team's star chaser and Jones's likely successor as captain someday, offered Ginny a curt nod before taking her place at the head of the table. Bronwyn and Caris, the beaters, were identical twins who finished each other's sentences and flew in perfect synchronization. Effion, the keeper, was built like a mountain and had hands that could catch cannonballs. And Seren, the seeker, was barely 18, but flew with a single-minded intensity that reminded Ginny uncomfortably of Harry. Then there was Isla MacLeod, reserve chaser, whose jaw had tightened noticeably when Ginny had been announced as the new starter last month. She sat at the far end of the table now, picking at her porridge and not quite looking at anyone. "Right," Jones said, standing. "Season schedules posted. Opening match is in 3 weeks against Puddlemere. They're ranked 3rd in the league and they'll be coming for blood, especially after we knocked them out of the playoffs last year, which means for the next 3 weeks, we're going to train like our lives depend on it. Morning sessions from 6 to 9, afternoon sessions from 2 to 5, strength training at 11, strategy sessions after dinner. Any questions?" Silence. Even the twins looked subdued. "Excellent. Pitch in 30 minutes. Full kit. Don't be late." Training was brutal. Jones ran them through passing drills until Ginny's arms felt like lead and her fingers could barely grip the quaffle. Then came defensive formations, offensive plays, counter plays, and a practice match that left everyone bruised and snapping at each other. Ginny took an elbow to the ribs from Isla during a particularly aggressive scramble for the quaffle and barely held back a hex. "Keep your head in the game, Weasley," Jones's voice boomed from the sidelines. "If you can't handle contact in practice, you'll be useless in a real match." Ginny gritted her teeth and launched herself after the quaffle, beating Isla to it by half a second. She passed to Rhiannon, who scored effortlessly. Rhiannon didn't acknowledge the assist, already flying back into position. By the time Jones blew the final whistle, the sun was high overhead and Ginny could barely feel her legs. She descended slowly, her firebolt responding sluggishly to her numb hands, and touched down on wobbling knees. "Better," Jones said, though she didn't sound particularly impressed. "Weasley, you're passing sharp, but you're too reckless on defense. You're going to get yourself killed charging beaters like that. Callahan, solid work. Rhiannon, beautiful goals as always. Isla..." She fixed the reserve chaser with a hard stare. "If you spend more energy trying to knock Weasley off her broom than actually playing Quidditch, you'll be riding the bench all season. Clear?" Isla's face flushed red, but she nodded. "Good. Shower up. Lunch in an hour, then strength training. Dismissed." The locker room was quiet, except for the sound of running water and exhausted breathing. Ginny peeled off her practice robes. They were soaked with sweat and bore a new rip across the shoulder where she'd scraped against a goalpost, and stepped into the shower. The hot water felt like heaven on her aching muscles. "You played well today." Ginny opened her eyes to find Rhiannon in the shower stall beside her, rinsing soap from her short blonde hair. The team's star chaser had barely spoken to Ginny off the pitch since she'd arrived. "Thanks," Ginny said cautiously. "You've got good instincts, fast reflexes. Jones is right about the recklessness, though." Rhiannon turned off her water and reached for a towel. "You fly like you're trying to prove something. In professional Quidditch, that'll get you benched. Or worse." She walked away before Ginny could respond, leaving her standing under the cooling spray and trying to unpack that particular observation. Was she trying to prove something? Maybe. Maybe she was trying to prove she was more than a war survivor, more than the girl who'd been used as a weapon, more than Mrs. Harry Potter. Or maybe she was just trying to prove it to herself. That evening, after dinner and a mercifully short strategy session, Ginny found herself back on the pitch. The stadium lights were off, the grounds empty except for the occasional house elf tending the flower beds. She should have been in bed. They had another 6 o'clock session tomorrow morning. But her body was still thrumming with restless energy. She mounted her broom and pushed off, rising into the darkness. No stars tonight. Clouds had rolled in from the west, heavy with the promise of rain. She flew lazy circles around the pitch, letting her mind drift. 3 weeks until the season opener. 3 weeks until her face would be plastered across every sports page in Wizarding Britain. 3 weeks until journalists started asking about Harry, about the war, about whether she'd gotten her spot on the team because of who she'd married or what she'd survived. You married him because you're weak, because you needed someone strong to hide behind. "Shut up," Ginny whispered to the empty air. "You're still that scared little girl in the chamber. You'll always be that girl." I said shut up. She pulled up sharply, her broom nearly vertical, and hung there at 400 feet with her heart racing and her breath coming in gasps. This was ridiculous. Tom Riddle was dead. Voldemort was dead. The diary was destroyed, burned to nothing by basilisk venom, and sealed away in the Department of Mysteries. He couldn't hurt her anymore. So why did his voice still echo in her skull? Rain began to fall, fat droplets that quickly soaked through her robes. Ginny stayed where she was, suspended in the darkness, and let the water run down her face. Maybe Rhiannon was right. Maybe she was trying to prove something. Maybe she thought if she flew fast enough, high enough, far enough. She could finally escape the shadow of that cursed diary and everything it had made her do. But shadows, she was learning, weren't so easily outrun. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Ginny finally turned her broom toward the ground, descending through the rain until her feet touched wet grass. She was shivering now, her robes plastered to her body and her hair hanging in dripping ropes. She should go inside. She should sleep. Instead, she stood at the center line of the pitch and looked up at the 3 golden hoops rising into the storm-dark sky. "I'm going to do this," she said aloud to herself, to the ghosts in her head, to anyone who might be listening. "I'm going to be brilliant, not because I'm a Weasley, or because I'm married to Harry, or because I survived Tom Bloody Riddle. I'm going to be brilliant because I choose to be." The rain answered her with thunder. Ginny smiled, fierce and cold, and walked back toward the manor house. In 3 weeks, the season would begin. In 3 weeks, the world would be watching. She intended to give them something worth watching. Behind her, unnoticed, a light flickered on in Coach Jones's office window. The older woman stood watching her newest chaser trudge through the rain and allowed herself the smallest of satisfied smiles. She'd seen that particular fire before, in young witches who'd survived things they shouldn't have and come out harder for it. Ginny Weasley was going to be either the best player Jones had ever coached, or she was going to burn out spectacularly. Jones was betting on the former. She turned away from the window and returned to her desk, where a stack of match footage waited for review. The season was coming, and the Harpies had work to do. But for the first time since signing Ginny Weasley, Jones felt certain she'd made the right call. The girl had talent. More than that, she had something to prove. And in professional Quidditch, that made all the difference. The owl arrived during breakfast, 3 days before the season opener. Ginny was halfway through her porridge when a large tawny barn owl swooped through the dining hall's open window and dropped a rolled copy of the Daily Prophet directly into her eggs. Yolk splattered across the table. The owl, looking entirely too pleased with itself, settled on the back of her chair and began preening. "Brilliant," Ginny muttered, fishing the newspaper out of her ruined breakfast. The front page was mercifully clean. Some story about Gringotts updating their security protocols. But as she unrolled it, a photograph on page 3 caught her eye. It was her, flying through a goal hoop during yesterday's open practice, her face set in concentration, red hair streaming behind her. The photograph moved, showing her catching the quaffle and passing it to Maeve in one fluid motion. It should have been a decent action shot. The headline ruined it. Potter's wife takes flight. Can Ginny Weasley soar on her own merits? Oh, for... Ginny bit back the curse and scanned the article. It was written by someone named Cordelia Thatch, who apparently covered Quidditch for the Prophet Sports section. The piece started professionally enough, mentioning Ginny's school record and her tryout performance. Then it derailed. Of course, one must wonder whether the youngest Weasley's position with the prestigious Harpies owes more to her maiden name's Quidditch legacy, her brothers played professionally, or to her married name. Mrs. Potter has certainly faced her share of challenges, having survived possession by you-know-who as a mere child. One can only hope that such traumatic experiences haven't affected her ability to perform under the pressure of professional play. When asked for comment, Coach Gwenog Jones stated simply, "Weasley earned her spot." But with the season opener mere days away, critics wonder, will the girl who married the chosen one prove she's more than her famous connections? Ginny read it twice, feeling heat creep up her neck. Across the table, Maeve had gone very still. "Don't," Maeve said quietly. "Don't what?" "Don't let it get to you. That's what they want." Maeve reached across and plucked the prophet from Ginny's hands. She skimmed the article, her expression darkening. "Thatch is a vulture. Always has been. Last year, she wrote 3 separate pieces about how I was too old to keep my starting position. I'm 31. What happened? I scored 8 goals against the Magpies, and she had to write a retraction." Maeve's smile was sharp. "Best way to shut them up is to play so bloody well they've got nothing to criticize." Rhiannon appeared at Ginny's shoulder, reading over her arm. "They spelled your name right, at least. Last season they kept calling me Rhiannon Davis. No, for 3 months." She straightened, her expression unreadable. "Still, Potter's wife is lazy journalism. You're on the team roster as Weasley." "Fat lot, they care," Isla muttered from down the table. When everyone looked at her, she shrugged. "What? We all know why the prophet's paying attention. We haven't had this much press coverage in years. Not since Gwenog's last season as a player." "Then we'd better give them something worth writing about," Gwenog Jones said, striding into the hall with her usual barely contained energy. She grabbed the prophet from Maeve and scanned the article in seconds. Her lip curled. Thatch should have known. Woman wouldn't recognize good Quidditch if it flew up and hit her in the face. She tossed the paper into the fireplace, where it caught immediately and blazed green. "Right. Pitch in 20 minutes. We're running the Falcon formation until you can do it in your sleep. Move." The journalist descended that afternoon. Ginny had just finished lunch when a house elf appeared at her elbow, wringing his tea towel hands anxiously. "Begging Miss Weasley's pardon, but there's peoples at the gates wanting interviews. Coach Jones says Miss should decide if Miss wants to speak with them." Ginny's stomach sank. "How many people?" "7 reporters, Miss, and 2 photographers, and a witch from Witch Weekly with a photographer and a makeup person." The house elf looked personally affronted by this last detail. "Merlin's beard," Ginny muttered. She found Jones in her office, reviewing formation diagrams with Rhiannon and Maeve. "You're cool, Weasley," Jones said, without looking up. "You can talk to them now, get it over with, or you can ignore them, and they'll just ambush you after the opener. Either way, they're not going away." Ginny thought of Harry, who dealt with this constantly in his aura work. He'd taught her his strategy. Answer the basic questions, don't give them ammunition, and get out quickly. "I'll talk to them. 20 minutes, maximum." "Smart girl. Use the front lawn. More space. Easier to leave when you're done. Take Maeve with you." "I don't need a babysitter." "Take Maeve with you," Jones repeated, steel in her voice. "She knows these vultures. She'll step in if they get nasty." The front lawn had been hastily arranged, with chairs for the journalists, all facing a single seat, clearly meant for Ginny. It looked uncomfortably like an interrogation setup. Maeve touched her shoulder briefly before they walked out. "Remember, you don't owe them anything. You're doing them a favor." 7 pairs of eyes fixed on Ginny as she took her seat. The Witch Weekly photographer started snapping pictures immediately. Ginny recognized Cordelia Thatch in the front row, quill poised eagerly over her parchment. "Thank you for your time, Miss Weasley." Or is it Mrs. Potter? This from a thin wizard with a reedy voice and a press badge from the Holyhead Herald. Weasley, Ginny said firmly. I play under my maiden name. Of course, of course. Now, the season opener is in 3 days. How are you feeling about your first professional match? Safe question. Ginny relaxed fractionally. Excited, nervous, ready to prove I belong here. And what about the pressure of living up to your family's Quidditch legacy? Thatch leaned forward. Your brothers Ron and Charlie both played professionally. George played in school. Do you feel you're competing with their achievements? I'm not competing with anyone except the women on the opposing team, Ginny said. My brothers have their own careers. This is mine. But surely the comparisons must weigh on you. Thatcher's smile didn't reach her eyes. Especially given that you're also, of course, married to Harry Potter. Does he worry about you getting injured? I imagine after everything he went through during the war, he must be quite protective. There it was. Ginny kept her expression neutral. Harry supports my career completely. He knows I can take care of myself. Still, it must be challenging, balancing marriage to such a famous wizard with your own professional ambitions. How do you manage to keep your personal life separate from your Quidditch career? The same way anyone manages work and relationships, Ginny said, letting a bit of ice creep into her voice. With communication and mutual respect. Next question. The Witch Weekly reporter, a plump witch with elaborate curls, raised her hand. Ginevra. May I call you Ginevra? Our readers are dying to know about your matchday routine. What do you eat for breakfast? How do you style your hair under your helmet? Do you have any good luck charms? Ginny blinked. I eat whatever the house elves prepare, usually eggs and toast. My hair goes in a plait. And no charms. But surely, my good luck charm is talent and hard work, Ginny said flatly. A younger reporter, barely out of Hogwarts by the look of him, spoke up nervously. You played Seeker at Hogwarts, but you're a chaser for the Harpies. Why the position change? Finally, a question about actual Quidditch. Ginny felt herself relax. I played Seeker because we needed one, and I was fast enough. But I've always preferred the teamwork aspect of chasing. The passing plays, the strategy. Seeking is solitary. Chasing is collaborative. It suits me better. Speaking of Hogwarts, Thatch interjected smoothly. You had quite an eventful school career. The Chamber of Secrets incident in your first year, then of course the Battle of Hogwarts. Do you find that surviving dark magic has given you any advantage on the pitch? Perhaps a higher pain tolerance, or... No, Ginny said sharply. Beside her, Maeve tensed. Surviving trauma doesn't give you superpowers. It just means you survived. My Quidditch skills have nothing to do with any of that. But surely the experience must have shaped you as a person, made you stronger perhaps, more determined. Ginny's hands clenched in her lap. She wanted to hex Cordelia Thatcher's perfectly coiffed hair into serpents. Instead, she took a slow breath. What shaped me was choosing to keep living after it was over, choosing to keep trying, keep growing. The trauma itself didn't make me strong. How I dealt with it did. And that's all I'm saying about that. One more question, the Witch Weekly reporter chirped, oblivious to the tension. What do you say to critics who claim you only got your position because of your famous husband? The lawn went silent. Even Thatch looked mildly uncomfortable with that one. Ginny stood. Maeve stood with her. I say they can watch me play on Sunday and judge for themselves, Ginny said quietly. I earned my spot on this team. I'll prove it every time I take the pitch. Thank you for your time. That's all. She walked away before anyone could protest. Maeve a solid presence at her side. Behind them, the journalists erupted in a cacophony of additional questions. Ginny ignored them all, her heart hammering in her chest. That was well done, Maeve said once they were inside, especially the last bit. I wanted to set her on fire. I know, but you didn't. That's what matters. Maeve steered her toward the stairs. Go rest before afternoon practice, and don't read whatever they write tomorrow. It'll just make you angry. Ginny didn't rest. She couldn't. Instead, she found herself in the Manor's small library, a cozy room lined with Quidditch strategy books and biographies of famous players. She pulled a volume off the shelf at random, Legendary Chasers, from Morgan to Mullet, and curled up in a wingback chair by the window. She'd barely read 2 pages when Rhiannon appeared in the doorway. Thought I'd find you here. The senior chaser claimed the chair opposite Ginny. Jones wants us to review the Puddlemere tape tonight. Their keeper's got a tell. She favors her right side when she's tired. Thought you should know. Thanks. Rhiannon studied her for a long moment. The press conference. I heard it got ugly. Thatch asked if trauma gave me superpowers on the pitch. Of course she did. Rhiannon's expression hardened. 4 years ago, when I first made starting chaser, a reporter asked if I was sleeping with Jones to get the position. Right there in front of everyone. Asked it like it was a legitimate question. Ginny's eyes widened. What did you do? Told him Jones had better taste than that, and also that she could have him banned from all Harpy's events for the rest of his miserable career. She did. Rhiannon smiled thinly. They'll always try to reduce us to something other than our abilities. Women who are wives, daughters, sisters, lovers, anything except athletes. Our job is to make them look stupid for trying. And how do we do that? By being so bloody good, they run out of insults and have to actually write about Quidditch. Rhiannon stood. Come on, let's look at that tape. If you're going to shut them up on Sunday, you'll need to know every weakness Puddlemere's got. That night, after dinner and strategy sessions and a team meeting about pre-match logistics, Ginny finally retreated to her room. It was small but comfortable. A bed with a thick emerald quilt, a desk by the window, and a wardrobe that held her training robes and the match kit she'd wear on Sunday. She sat on the bed and pulled out a piece of parchment. Harry was working late, some emergency at the Aura office, but she needed to process the day somehow. Dear Harry, the journalists came today. It was as awful as you said it would be. They asked about you, about us, about the war. One of them actually asked if surviving the chamber gave me some kind of advantage in Quidditch. Like being possessed by Voldemort's soul fragment was some kind of training regime. I wanted to scream at them. I wanted to tell them they had no right to dig into the worst thing that ever happened to me just for a story. But I didn't. I said my piece and walked away, and I suppose that's progress. The season opener is in 3 days. 3 days until everyone gets to judge whether I'm actually good enough or just trading on my family name and our marriage. 3 days until I prove, to them, to my teammates, to myself, that I belong here. I'm terrified, Harry. Not of playing. I know I can play. I'm terrified of failing publicly. of proving them right, of being Potter's wife who couldn't cut it, instead of Ginny Weasley, chaser. I miss you. Come visit when you can. I could use one of your terrible jokes right about now. Love, Ginny. She sealed the letter and sent it with the team's postal owl, then changed into her nightclothes and climbed into bed. Sleep came slowly, her mind churning through every question from the press conference, every suspicious look from Isla, every drill she'd fumbled in practice. When she finally slept, she dreamed of flying, but this time, instead of soaring free, she was weighed down by invisible chains. Below her, a crowd of faceless journalists shouted questions that echoed like curses. And somewhere in the distance, barely audible beneath the noise, Tom Riddle's voice whispered, "You'll never escape what you are, what I made you." Ginny woke gasping, her sheets tangled around her legs. The clock on her nightstand read 4 in the morning. Practice started in 2 hours. She lay in the darkness and tried to steady her breathing. 3 more days. Just 3 more days. And then she could let her flying do the talking. She just hoped it would be enough. The morning prophet arrived during breakfast, and despite Maeve's warning, Ginny couldn't resist looking. Thatcher's article ran on page 2, complete with a photograph of Ginny from yesterday. Mid-answer, her expression caught somewhere between irritation and exhaustion. The headline, "The Girl Who Married Famous, Ginny Weasley's Quidditch Dreams." Ginny didn't read past the first paragraph. She folded the paper, set it aside, and finished her eggs. Across the table, Jones watched her with approval. "Good. Now get to the pitch. We've got work to do." 3 days until the opener. 3 days to prove everyone wrong. Ginny intended to make every second count. The Portkey deposited them in a windswept field outside Kenmare just after noon. Ginny stumbled as her feet hit solid ground, catching herself on Maeve's shoulder. Around her, the rest of the Harpies were steadying themselves with varying degrees of grace. Fionn looked completely unbothered, while the twins were laughing at each other's green-tinged faces. "Right," Jones said, shouldering her traveling bag. "Stadium's a 10-minute walk. We'll get settled in the visitors' locker room, run through warm-ups, and then it's match time. Remember, Kenmare plays dirty. They'll try to get in your heads. Don't let them." The opening match against Puddlemere United had gone better than Ginny had dared hope. She'd scored twice and assisted on 3 more goals, and the Harpies had won 180-160. The Prophet's headline the next day had been grudgingly positive. "Weasley delivers in debut." Thatcher's article had still managed to mention Harry twice and the Chamber of Secrets once, but at least she'd also written about Ginny's actual performance 3 matches later, and they were 3-1. Respectable. But today felt different. The walk to Kenmare's stadium took them through the small wizarding village that supported the team. Shops lined the main street, their windows full of green and yellow Kestrel's merchandise. A group of children spotted the Harpies and started chanting immediately, "Harpies, Harpies, fly away. Kestrels will win the day." "Charming," Rhiannon muttered. The stadium loomed ahead, a massive structure that seemed to grow out of the Irish hillside itself. The stands were already filling, a sea of green and yellow, with only small patches of emerald marking the visiting Harpies supporters. As they approached the players' entrance, Ginny heard the crowd's roar, even through the thick stone walls. The visitors' locker room was cramped and damp, with barely enough benches for everyone. Someone had carved Kestrel's rule into the wall above the showers. Jones took one look around and snorted. Lovely hospitality. Right, get changed. Warm-ups in 20 minutes. Ginny pulled on her match kit, emerald green robes with the Harpy's golden insignia over her heart, her name stitched across the back in neat letters. She plaited her hair tightly, checked her broom for the third time, and tried to ignore the way her hands wanted to shake. You all right? Maeve was lacing her boots, watching Ginny with concern. Fine, just, it's loud out there. It's Kenmare. They're always loud. Maeve stood and tested her weight. And they'll try to rattle you specifically. You're the new player, the famous one. They'll have signs, chants, the whole show. Just tune it out and play your game. Right, Ginny said, but her chest felt tight. The warm-up was standard. Passing drills, a few practice shots on goal, some basic formations. But even out on the pitch before the match started, Ginny could feel the weight of the crowd's attention. Most of them were jeering the Harpies generally, but whenever Ginny touched the quaffle, the noise intensified. She caught fragments of chants, but couldn't make out words over the general roar. Focus, Rhiannon called, zipping past her. Eyes on the ball, not the stands. The referee's whistle blew for the start, and suddenly there was no more time for nerves. The quaffle was released. Rhiannon snatched it from the air, and they were flying. Kenmare's chasers were aggressive from the first second, flying tight formations and using every legal block and a few questionable ones to disrupt the Harpies' rhythm. Their beaters sent bludgers screaming through the Harpies' ranks with vicious accuracy. Within 5 minutes, Ginny had nearly been unseated twice, but she held her own. She caught a long pass from Maeve, dodged a Kestrel chaser, and sent the quaffle spiraling toward Rhiannon, who scored. 10-0, Harpies. The crowd's roar turned angry, and that's when Ginny started to hear the words. Potter's puppet, Riddle's girl, Dark Lord's leftovers. The chants hit her like physical blows. Ginny nearly dropped the quaffle, recovering at the last second to pass it wildly to Maeve. Her vision blurred at the edges. The stadium seemed to tilt. That's it, Ginny. Let me in. Let me help you. No, that wasn't real. Tom Riddle was dead. This was just cruel fans. Just words, just... Weasley, focus. Joan's voice cut through the noise, sharp and demanding. Ginny shook her head hard and threw herself back into the game. She scored once, then again. But every time she flew near the stands, the chants grew louder. Someone had a sign. How many Dark Lords will you marry? Another read, once a puppet, always a puppet. The Harpies were up 70-40 when it happened. Ginny intercepted a pass from a Kenmare chaser and turned sharply toward goal. The crowd's roar was deafening, a wall of sound that pressed against her skull like a curse. And underneath it, threading through it, she heard his voice. Look at them, Ginny. They know what you are. They know you're hollow, empty, mine. No, Ginny whispered, but her hands had gone numb on her broom. You can't escape me. I'm in your blood, your bones, your breath. Every time you fly with my magic in your veins. The stadium spun. The 3 golden hoops in front of her multiplied, became 6, became 9. Ginny felt herself listing sideways, her grip on the quaffle slipping. Below her, the pitch seemed impossibly far away, and for a terrifying moment she wasn't flying over Kenmare Stadium at all. She was in the chamber, surrounded by cold stone and the serpent's hiss and Tom Riddle's beautiful, terrible face. Weasley! Maeve's shout snapped her back. Ginny caught herself. pulled up hard, but the quaffle was gone, stolen by a Kenmare chaser who was already streaking toward the Harpy's goal. The crowd cheered wildly. Ginny's heart hammered against her ribs. Her breath came in short gasps. She could still hear Tom's voice underneath everything, could still feel the echo of his presence like ice against her spine. The match continued around her. She moved through it mechanically, catching passes, making plays. But her mind was fractured. Every time the crowd roared, it sounded like the basilisk's hiss. Every time she looked down, she half expected to see the chamber's flooded floor instead of green grass. Rhiannon scored twice more. Kenmare's seeker caught sight of the snitch, but Seren was faster, diving in a spectacular spiral that ended with a tiny golden ball clutched in her fist. Match over. Harpy's win, 210-130. They should have been celebrating. Instead, Ginny landed badly, stumbling off her broom and nearly falling before Maeve caught her arm. Changing room, Maeve said quietly. Now. Ginny let herself be steered through the post-match chaos, the referee confirming the score, Jones giving a brief statement to journalists, the Kestrel supporters booing as the Harpies collected their brooms. The locker room was blessedly empty. Maeve guided Ginny to a bench and pushed her head between her knees. Breathe, in through your nose, out through your mouth. Come on, Weasley. Breathe. Ginny gasped for air. Her whole body was shaking now, tremors she couldn't control. Her vision swam with tears. She refused to let fall. I'm fine, she managed. Just too much noise. I'm fine. You're not fine. You nearly fell off your broom. Maeve crouched in front of her, hands steady on Ginny's shoulders. What happened out there? Nothing. The crowd was just... They were saying things. What things? Ginny shook her head, unable to voice it. How could she explain that a dead boy's voice had followed her onto the pitch? That she'd heard Tom Riddle as clearly as if he were hovering beside her, whispering poison in her ear. They'd think she was mad. Maybe she was mad. The door banged open and the rest of the team poured in, sweaty and triumphant. Jones took one look at Ginny and sent everyone else to the showers with a jerk of her chin. Only Rhiannon stayed, hanging back near the door. Weasley. Jones pulled up a bench and sat directly in front of Ginny, forcing eye contact. You played through it. Whatever happened out there, you didn't quit. That takes guts. I almost cost us the match. But you didn't. We won. Jones's expression softened slightly. That crowd was nasty, personal. I heard some of what they were chanting. If you need to talk about it, I don't. The words came out sharper than Ginny intended. I just need to be better at blocking it out. That's all. Jones studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right. But Weasley, this is your first season. You're still learning to handle the pressure. There's no shame in struggling with it. I'm not struggling. I'm fine. Sure you are. Jones stood. Shower up. We've got a portkey back in an hour, and I want everyone fed before we leave. Move. The team bus, a magical coach that could travel between portkey points, was quiet on the way back to Abergavenny. The twins dozed against each other. Effion stared out the window at the darkening countryside. Seren was reading through fan mail, smiling at the nice letters and tossing the nasty ones without a second glance. Ginny sat alone at the back, still shaking despite the warm travelling cloak someone had draped over her shoulders. She stared at her hands and tried to stop hearing the crowd's chants. Tom's voice, the horrible echo of one bleeding into the other. Mind if I sit? Rhiannon didn't wait for an answer, settling into the seat across from Ginny. She had a thermos of hot chocolate and offered Ginny a cup without comment. Ginny took it, grateful for something warm to hold. First away match is always the hardest, Rhiannon said after a while. Home crowd loves you. Away crowd wants to destroy you. Gets easier once you've survived a few. Does it? No. But you learn to pretend it does. Rhiannon sipped her own chocolate. They got to you today. The Kenmare supporters. Saw it happen. You went pale, started flying erratic. Nearly lost the quaffle twice. Ginny said nothing. Want to know what they used to chant at me? Rhiannon didn't wait for an answer. First year I made the team, my dad had just been arrested for illegal potion brewing. Nothing serious. He was making pepper-up potion without a license. But the tabloids made it sound like he was the next Voldemort. Every away match, I'd hear, criminal's daughter, potion scum, daddy's in Azkaban. She laughed, sharp and bitter. He wasn't even in Azkaban. He paid a fine and did community service. But facts don't matter to people who just want to hurt you. How did you deal with it? Badly at first. Had a complete breakdown after a match in Montrose. Cried for 2 hours straight. Told Jones I was quitting. Rhiannon smiled slightly. She told me I could quit after the season, but not before. Said quitting in the middle would let the bastards win. So I stayed, and eventually I learned to tune them out. Mostly. Ginny looked up. Mostly? Some days are harder than others. Some days, the old wounds open up again, and it's like you're back at the beginning, just trying to survive. Rhiannon met her eyes. But you keep flying anyway. That's what makes you a Harpy. The coach hit a bump, and they both grabbed their armrests. Outside, the sun had fully set, turning the windows into dark mirrors. Ginny caught her reflection, pale, hollow-eyed, hair escaping her plait in wild red curls. She looked like a ghost. They called me Riddle's puppet today, she said quietly. Riddle's girl, Dark Lord's leftovers. Rhiannon's expression hardened. That's vile, even for away fans. The thing is, Ginny swallowed hard. Part of me wonders if they're right, if he's still in here somehow, in my head. He's not. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Rhiannon leaned forward, intense. Because if he were, you wouldn't be afraid he was. Possession doesn't come with self-awareness and doubt. It comes with certainty. With his voice speaking through your mouth, not whispering in your ear. She paused. What you're experiencing, that's trauma. That's your brain trying to protect you from more hurt by constantly scanning for threats. It's not him. It's you trying to heal. Ginny blinked rapidly, fighting tears. How do you know all this? Mind healer. Saw one for 2 years after the thing with my dad. Rhiannon shrugged. Not a cure, but it helps. Gives you tools to manage it when things get hard. You might consider it. Maybe, Ginny said, though the thought of sitting in a mind healer's office and discussing the chamber made her want to vomit. They sat in silence for the rest of the journey. When the coach finally pulled up to the Harpy's training facility, Rhiannon stood and clapped Ginny's shoulder briefly. You played well today, despite everything. Remember that. Her room felt too small that night. Ginny paced from window to desk to bed and back again, unable to settle. She tried writing to Harry, but the words wouldn't come. What could she say? Dear Harry, I'm hearing Tom Riddle's voice again, and I think I might be losing my mind. Instead, She pulled out her own journal, a blank book she'd bought on impulse after the war, but barely used. The first few pages held scattered entries, notes about family dinners, thoughts about the future, one very short paragraph about marrying Harry. Everything else was blank. Ginny sat at her desk, quill in hand, and stared at the empty page. Then she wrote, "Today I heard his voice during the match. Tom's voice. Not my thoughts about him. His voice, like he was actually there. The crowd was chanting things about me being his puppet, and suddenly I was back in the chamber. I could see the water, smell the stone, feel the cold seeping into my bones. I know he's dead. I watched Harry destroy the diary. I saw Voldemort fall in the Great Hall. He's gone. So why do I still hear him? Rhiannon says it's trauma, that my brain is stuck in a loop, trying to protect me from threats that don't exist anymore. Maybe she's right. Or maybe there's still a piece of him in me, something the diary left behind that I'll never be rid of. I'm so tired of being afraid. I'm tired of wondering if I'm broken. I'm tired of that voice in my head that sounds like him, but might just be me, telling myself all the cruel things I'm scared are true. I want to fly without the weight of the chamber dragging me down. I want to just be Ginny, not the girl who was possessed. But I don't know how." Her hand cramped. She set down the quill and stared at what she'd written. Seeing it in ink made it real somehow, both more frightening and less. These were her words, her fears, her trauma, not his. She closed the journal and tucked it into her desk drawer. Then she changed into her nightclothes, climbed into bed, and pulled the covers over her head like a child hiding from nightmares. Tomorrow, they'd review match footage. Tomorrow, Jones would point out every mistake Ginny had made, every second she'd lost focus, every opportunity she'd missed because she was too busy battling ghosts. But tonight, alone in the dark, Ginny let herself shake, let herself cry silently into her pillow, let herself be terrified and hurt and angry and small. Tomorrow she'd be strong again. Tomorrow she'd be a Harpy. Tonight she was just Ginny Weasley, trying desperately not to drown. Outside her window, an owl called mournfully into the darkness. The sound followed her into uneasy sleep, where she dreamed of flying through crowds that chanted her name, but couldn't tell if they were cheering or cursing, celebrating or condemning. In the dream, Tom Riddle smiled at her from the stands, and she couldn't look away. The howler arrived on a Tuesday morning, screaming into the dining hall with all the subtlety of a rogue bludger. Ginny was eating breakfast, or trying to. Her appetite had been dodgy since the Kenmare match 3 days ago, when the red envelope shot through the window and hovered directly in front of her face. Her stomach dropped. She recognized her mother's handwriting on the envelope, but howlers from Molly Weasley were usually reserved for life-threatening situations or spectacular acts of stupidity. The entire team went silent. Even Jones paused with her coffee cup halfway to her lips. "Well," Maeve said quietly, "best get it over with." Ginny snatched the howler from the air and tore it open before she could lose her nerve. But instead of her mother's voice erupting in a volcanic rage, the enchanted letter spoke in Molly's gentlest, most concerned tone, which was somehow worse. "Ginny dear, I've been reading the match reports and your father and I are worried about you. You haven't been home in weeks, and the prophet said you looked visibly shaken after the Kenmare match. Please come for Sunday dinner. No excuses. We miss you. Love, Mum." The howler burst into flames, and disintegrated into ash on her plate. Ginny stared at the remains, her cheeks burning. Around the table, her teammates were suddenly very interested in their own breakfasts. "Your mum sounds lovely," Bronwyn offered. "She is," Ginny muttered. "She's also impossible to refuse." Jones cleared her throat. "We don't have a match this Sunday. You're free to go. Might do you good, actually. You've been wound tight as a snitch since Kenmare." Ginny wanted to argue, but the truth was she had been struggling. Her flying was technically sound, but something had shifted after hearing Tom's voice so clearly on the pitch. She was hesitant now, second-guessing herself, pulling back from aggressive plays. Jones had noticed. Rhiannon had noticed. Even Isla had stopped shooting her hostile looks and started looking vaguely concerned instead. "Fine," Ginny said. "I'll go." The Burrow on a Sunday afternoon was exactly what Ginny needed, and also the last place she wanted to be. She apparated into the garden just before noon, the familiar crack of displaced air drawing immediate attention from inside the house. The kitchen door flew open, and Molly Weasley emerged like a benevolent whirlwind, already reaching for Ginny with flour-dusted hands. "There you are! Oh, look at you! You're too thin. Haven't they been feeding you properly? Come inside. Lunch is almost ready. Everyone's here. Well, Percy's working, but everyone else came. Even Charlie's visiting from Romania." Ginny let herself be swept into her mother's embrace, breathing in the familiar scents of bread and herbs and home. For a moment, the tight knot of tension in her chest loosened slightly. The kitchen was chaos in the best way. Ron and Hermione were arguing cheerfully about the proper way to organize kitchen cupboards while setting the table. George was charming garden gnomes to dance across the windowsill, much to Arthur's delight. Bill and Fleur sat at the far end of the table with Victoire, their daughter, who was babbling happily in a mixture of English and French. And Charlie, broad-shouldered, sun-weathered Charlie, looked up from the pot he was stirring and grinned. "There's our Quidditch star. How's it feel being famous, Gin?" "Exhausting," Ginny said honestly, and everyone laughed. Harry was sitting by the fireplace, reading a ministry memo and frowning at it. He looked up when Ginny entered, and his expression transformed, worry melting into relief. He stood and crossed to her, pulling her into a brief, tight hug. "You didn't answer my last letter," he said quietly. "I know. I'm sorry. It's been—" "I know." He kissed her forehead. "We'll talk later, yeah?" Lunch was magnificent. Molly had prepared enough food for 20 people despite only 9 being present, and everyone ate until they were groaning. The conversation flowed easily. George's latest product innovations, Charlie's stories about a particularly stubborn Hungarian horntail, Hermione's work at the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures. No one mentioned Ginny's Quidditch season directly, and she was grateful for it. After lunch, while Molly was organizing dessert and the others were scattered around the garden, Ron found Ginny sitting alone under the old apple tree. He dropped down beside her with a grunt, stretching his long legs out in front of him. "So," he said, "you going to tell me what's actually wrong? Or are we going to pretend everything's fine?" Ginny glanced at him sideways. "When did you get perceptive?" "War'll do that to you. Also, Hermione's been giving me lessons in emotional intelligence." He said it like he was discussing potions homework. "You looked like death at lunch. You kept staring at your plate like it was going to attack you. And you've lost weight. Even I can tell. And I'm rubbish at noticing that stuff usually." I'm fine. Ginny. She sighed and leaned back against the tree trunk. Above them, leaves rustled in the breeze. A garden gnome peeked out from behind a nearby flower bed, saw Ron, and scurried away muttering. The Kenmare match was bad, she said finally. The crowd was brutal. They were chanting things about the chamber, about Tom Riddle, and She swallowed hard. I heard his voice, Ron, during the match, as clearly as I'm hearing you right now, and I know he's dead. I know it. But it felt so real. Ron was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was carefully neutral. The Horcrux, the locket. When I was wearing it, it would whisper things. Terrible things about how I was useless, how Hermione and Harry didn't need me, how I'd always be the stupid sidekick. He paused. Even after we destroyed it, I'd still hear echoes sometimes. Usually, when I was stressed or scared. It took me months to realize it wasn't the Horcrux anymore. It was just my own fears, using his voice because that's what I'd learned to expect. Ginny looked at him, startled. You never said anything. Yeah, well, neither did you. He bumped her shoulder gently with his. We Weasleys, we're good at pretending we're fine when we're falling apart. Mum does it, Dad does it, all of us do it. But Ginny, you don't have to. Not with us. Not with me. Something in Ginny's chest cracked open. She felt tears burning at the corners of her eyes and blinked them back fiercely. I thought I was done with this. I thought I'd dealt with it, moved past it. But it's like he left a mark on me that I can't wash off. And now everyone knows about it because of the bloody press, and I can't escape it. You're not what he made you do, Ron said firmly. You know that, right? You were 11. You were a kid who got manipulated by one of the most evil wizards in history. Nothing that happened in the chamber was your fault. I know that in my head, but knowing and believing are different things. Yeah. Ron picked at the grass. Look, I'm not going to sit here and tell you it gets easier, because sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night, and I'm back in Malfoy Manor, listening to Hermione scream. Sometimes I see a spider, and I'm 12 years old again, completely useless. He looked at her steadily. But here's what I figured out. You're not what he made you. You're what you chose to become after, and you chose to keep fighting, keep living, keep flying. That's what matters. Ginny wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. When did you get so wise? When I stopped being an idiot about everything. He grinned. Only took me 21 years. They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching clouds drift across the sky. A pair of garden gnomes had gotten into a fight near the shed and were throwing radishes at each other. Arthur emerged from the kitchen to break it up, looking deeply pleased with the opportunity. I've been writing in a journal, Ginny said eventually, about the chamber, about the matches, about all of it. It helps sometimes. Seeing it on paper makes it feel less like it's drowning me from the inside. That's good. That's really good, actually. Ron hesitated. Have you thought about talking to someone, like professionally? Hermione sees a mind healer, has since the war ended, says it's the only reason she can sleep through the night without nightmares. Rhiannon suggested the same thing. Rhiannon sounds smart. You should listen to her. Ron stood and offered Ginny his hand, pulling her to her feet. Come on. Mum made treacle tart, and if we don't get back soon, Charlie'll eat the whole thing. They walked back toward the house together, and for the first time in days, Ginny felt like she could breathe properly. The knot in her chest hadn't disappeared, but it had loosened. Just slightly. Just enough. After dessert, Harry drew Ginny aside and they walked down to the orchard together, away from the noisy warmth of the burrow. The apple trees were heavy with late-season fruit, and the air smelled like grass and approaching autumn. "Ron talked to you," Harry said. It wasn't a question. "He did. Said you've been giving him emotional intelligence lessons." Harry laughed. "Hermione's doing, not mine. But he's gotten better at it, hasn't he? Actually listening instead of just panicking and saying the wrong thing. He told me about the locket, about still hearing echoes of it sometimes." Ginny plucked a low-hanging apple and turned it over in her hands. "I didn't know that. He doesn't talk about it much. But yeah, it still gets to him, especially when he's stressed." Harry stopped walking and turned to face her. "Ginny, I've been worried about you. The way you've been writing, or not writing. And then that Prophet article about Kenmare. They said you looked shaken and disoriented during the second half. I was fine. Don't do that. Don't shut me out." His green eyes were intense behind his glasses. "I know what it's like to have everyone watching you, judging you, expecting you to be something you're not. It's exhausting. It's crushing. And you don't have to pretend with me that it isn't." Ginny looked down at the apple in her hands. Its skin was perfectly red, unblemished. She thought about how easy it would be to just take a bite, to sustain herself with something simple and sweet. But nothing about her life felt simple anymore. "I heard Tom's voice during the Kenmare match," she said quietly. "The crowd was chanting terrible things and I was back in the chamber. It felt so real, Harry, like he was actually there." Harry's expression darkened, but not with anger, with understanding. "I still hear him sometimes too. Voldemort, usually in my scar. Even though the Horcrux is gone, the connection is gone, all of it. But trauma doesn't care about logic. It just lingers. How do you deal with it?" "Badly, most of the time." He smiled slightly. "But I talked to someone, a mind healer at St. Mungo's. Kingsley made it mandatory for all auras after the war. But honestly, I think I'd have gone anyway eventually. It helps. Not a cure, but it helps. Everyone keeps telling me to see a mind healer. Because everyone who loves you can see you're struggling." Harry took her hand. "And there's no shame in getting help, Ginny. You survived something impossible. You're allowed to still be dealing with it." They walked back toward the house slowly, their fingers intertwined. Through the kitchen window, Ginny could see her family, Ron helping Hermione with the washing up, George making Victoire laugh, her parents sitting close together at the table, just being near each other. This was what she was fighting for, she realized. Not just her Quidditch career, not just her independence. She was fighting to keep being part of this. This warmth, this love, this gloriously chaotic family that had always been her anchor. "I'll think about it," she said. "The mind healer thing. I'll think about it. That's all I'm asking." Harry squeezed her hand. "And Ginny, for what it's worth, I think you're incredibly brave. You're facing your trauma head-on every time you step on that pitch. That takes more courage than most people will ever need." "I don't feel brave. I feel terrified. That's what makes it brave." That evening, after she'd said her goodbyes and promised her mother she'd come back in 2 weeks, "And bring an appetite, dear. You're still too thin," Ginny apparated back to the Harpy's facility. It was late enough that most of the team was either in bed or out enjoying their Sunday evening off. The manor was quiet, just the soft creaks of old wood and the distant hoot of an owl. Ginny went to her room and pulled out her journal. She wrote about lunch, about Ron's words, about Harry's understanding. She wrote about how the burrow still felt like home, even though she'd been living away from it for years now. She wrote about the weight that had lifted, just slightly, from having told someone, multiple someones, the truth about what she was experiencing. Then she wrote, "Maybe they're right. Maybe I do need help. Professional help, not just family and teammates trying their best. I've spent 3 years trying to be strong, trying to prove I'm fine, trying to pretend the chamber didn't break something in me that's still not fully healed. Ron said I'm not what Tom made me. I'm what I chose to become after. I want to believe that. I want to be that. But I don't know how to get there on my own. Tomorrow, I'll ask Jones about mind healers. Tomorrow, I'll take the first step toward actually dealing with this instead of just surviving it. Tomorrow. But tonight, I'm allowed to be proud of myself for telling the truth, even if it was terrifying. Even if I cried in front of Ron, which is mortifying. Even if I still hear Tom's voice sometimes. I told the truth, and the world didn't end. That's something." She closed the journal and tucked it away, then changed into her nightclothes and climbed into bed. Sleep came easier than it had in days, and when she dreamed, it was of flying through clear skies with her family, watching from below, cheering her name. No cruel chance, no Tom Riddle, just her, the sky, and the people who loved her. It wasn't a cure, but it was a start. The next morning, Ginny found Jones in her office before breakfast, reviewing match footage from their upcoming opponent. The coach looked up when Ginny knocked, gesturing her inside. "Weasley, you're up early." "Couldn't sleep." Ginny closed the door behind her and stood awkwardly in front of the desk. "I wanted to ask you something about resources for players dealing with trauma." Jones set down her quill and gave Ginny her full attention. "Go on. Do the Harpies have anyone on staff? A mind healer or counselor or something? For players who might want to talk to someone. Professionally." "We do, actually." Jones pulled out a file from her desk drawer and extracted a piece of parchment. "Healer Meredith Angharad. She's based in Cardiff, works with several professional Quidditch teams, specializes in performance anxiety and trauma. Good woman, discreet." She slid the parchment across the desk. "This has her contact information. She does sessions in person or via Flu, whatever works better for your schedule." Ginny took the parchment, her hands only shaking slightly. "Thank you." "Weasley." Jones waited until Ginny met her eyes. "Half the team has seen Meredith at some point. It's nothing to be ashamed of. Professional sports are brutal on the mind as well as the body. Taking care of both is just smart strategy." "Right, smart strategy. And Weasley? I'm glad you asked. Shows maturity." Jones picked up her quill again, already returning to her footage analysis. "Now go eat breakfast. We've got Montrose footage to review this afternoon, and I need you sharp." Ginny left the office with the parchment clutched in her hand and a strange, fragile feeling of hope blooming in her chest. She wasn't fixed, she wasn't cured, but she was taking steps, choosing to get help, choosing to fight for herself instead of just fighting against her memories. As she walked into the dining hall where her teammates were gathering for breakfast, Maeve looked up and smiled. There you are. Saved you a seat. How was your family visit? Good, Ginny said, and meant it. Really good, actually. She sat down, accepted a plate of eggs from a helpful house elf, and let the familiar sounds of team breakfast wash over her. Outside, the sun was rising over the Welsh mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. It was going to be a good day. And if it wasn't, well, she had people now. People who understood, who cared, who wouldn't let her fall. That was enough. For now, that was more than enough. The letter arrived on a Wednesday, delivered by a sleek grey owl that landed gracefully beside Ginny's breakfast plate and waited with unusual patience while she untied the parchment from its leg. Ginny recognized the letterhead immediately. Seeker's Digest, one of the most respected Quidditch journals in Britain. Unlike the Daily Prophet's sensationalist sports coverage or Witch Weekly's celebrity gossip, the Digest focused on actual tactics, player analysis, and thoughtful commentary about the game itself. She'd been reading it since she was 12. Dear Miss Weasley, my name is Owen Pritchard, and I'm a senior writer for Seeker's Digest. I've been following your rookie season with great interest. Your flying speaks for itself, and I believe you're one of the most promising chasers to enter professional Quidditch in years. I would like to request an in-depth interview for our January issue. Unlike typical press coverage, this would focus primarily on your tactical approach, your development as a player, and your perspective on modern chasing strategies. I'm interested in discussing your transition from school Quidditch to professional play, your relationship with your teammates, and your evolution over the course of this season. However, I'm aware that your personal history has been the subject of considerable and often inappropriate media attention. If you're willing, I would also like to give you the opportunity to address the public harassment you faced this season regarding your past, entirely on your own terms. This would be a chance to reclaim your narrative, should you choose to do so. If you'd prefer to keep the interview purely focused on Quidditch, I will absolutely respect that boundary. I believe you deserve coverage that reflects your actual achievements, rather than your famous connections or your trauma. I hope you'll consider this opportunity. Respectfully, Owen, Richard Senior Writer. Seeker's Digest. Ginny read the letter 3 times, her eggs growing cold. Across the table, Maeve noticed her distraction. Good news or bad news? I'm not sure yet. Ginny passed her the letter. What do you think? Maeve read it carefully, her expression thoughtful. Pritchard's solid. He interviewed me 2 years ago, asked intelligent questions, didn't try to twist anything. If you're going to do an interview, this would be the one to do. She handed the letter back. The question is whether you want to address the harassment publicly or just let your playing speak for itself. I don't know. Ginny folded the letter and tucked it into her robe's pocket. Part of me wants to just ignore it all, but another part of me thinks that staying silent lets them control the narrative, that they get to define me by my worst moments instead of who I actually am. Both choices are valid, Rhiannon said from down the table. She'd clearly been listening. I chose to address the stuff about my father publicly. Some players choose to stay private. Neither is wrong. How did you decide? I asked myself what I'd regret more, speaking up and potentially making it worse, or staying silent and always wondering if I'd missed my chance to set the record straight? Rhiannon shrugged. For me, speaking up was the right call, but you're not me. Jones appeared behind Ginny, reading over her shoulder without shame. Pritchard's good people. Whatever you decide, he'll respect it. But Weasley, if you're going to do this interview, do it soon. We're mid-season now. By January, half of what he wants to discuss will be old news. She moved on to refill her coffee, leaving Ginny to stare at her cooling eggs. That afternoon, Ginny sent a return owl to Pritchard, agreeing to the interview, but requesting time to think about how much personal history she wanted to discuss. He responded within hours, suggesting they meet the following Tuesday at the Harpy's facility and assuring her again that she could set whatever boundaries she needed. The days between the invitation and the actual interview passed in a blur of training and matches. The Harpies beat the Ballycastle Bats 200-150, with Ginny scoring 4 goals and assisting on 3 more. The Prophet's coverage was almost grudgingly positive. Weasley's tactical brilliance shines in Harpy's victory. Thatcher's byline was notably absent. Ginny had also made her first appointment with healer Angharad. The mind healer was a woman in her 50s, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that reminded Ginny slightly of Professor McGonagall. Their first session had been awkward. Ginny sitting rigidly in an unfamiliar office, trying to explain the Chamber of Secrets to someone who hadn't lived through it. But healer Angharad had listened without judgment and given her concrete tools for managing intrusive thoughts and flashbacks. Your brain learned to associate certain stimuli, loud, crowds, hostile environments, stress, with danger, the healer had explained. It's trying to protect you by staying hypervigilant, but we can teach it that you're safe now, that you can handle difficult situations without going back to that moment. It was helping, not dramatically, not overnight, but in small increments. Ginny was sleeping better. Flying felt slightly less like running away and more like reclaiming something that belonged to her. And now, she had to decide whether to let the world in on any of that. On Monday evening, Ginny flew to Grimmauld Place, where Harry and Ron were having their weekly chess game, a tradition they'd started after the war as an excuse to see each other regularly. Hermione was there too, buried in a book about magical creature rights, but glancing up occasionally to watch the game. Harry looked up when green flames announced Ginny's arrival. "Hey, we weren't expecting you till tomorrow. I need advice." Ginny settled onto the sofa beside Hermione. "And possibly to borrow your experience with invasive journalism." "Oh, good," Ron said, not looking up from the chessboard. "My favorite topic." Ginny explained about the Seeker's Digest interview, about Pritchard's offer to let her address the harassment on her own terms. "I don't know what to do. Part of me wants to just tell everyone to sod off and mind their own business. But another part thinks that if I don't say something, they'll just keep defining me by the chamber incident forever." Harry moved his knight and immediately looked like he regretted it as Ron's bishop swooped in for the kill. "When I did that interview with the Quibbler back in 5th year, the one where I talked about Voldemort returning, it felt terrifying. Like I was putting everything out there for people to judge and mock. But it also felt necessary. Like if I didn't tell the truth, Fudge and the Prophet would keep controlling what people believed. Did it help? Eventually. Not immediately. Plenty of people still thought I was lying or mad. But the people who mattered, who were willing to listen, finally heard the truth from me instead of from Rita Skeeter's poison quill. He looked at her seriously. The question is, do you need this? Will saying something publicly give you closure, or will it just open you up to more attacks? I don't know, Ginny admitted. What does your mind healer say? Hermione asked, finally closing her book. We haven't discussed it yet. My next appointment is Thursday. Then wait, Hermione said practically. Tell Pritchard you need a few more days. Discuss it with healer Angharad. Figure out what you actually want, and then make your decision. You don't have to rush this. Hermione's right, Ron said, capturing Harry's queen with entirely too much satisfaction. Also, checkmate. What? No, damn it, Ron. Watching them banter, Ginny felt some of her tension ease. This was good advice. She didn't have to decide tonight. She could take her time, think it through, make the choice that felt right for her rather than reacting out of pressure or fear. Tuesday morning brought another letter from Pritchard, this one delivered by the same patient grey owl. Miss Weasley, I wanted to add something to my previous correspondence. Whatever you choose to share or not share in this interview, I want you to know that the focus will remain on your achievements as a Quidditch player. That's what you deserve, and that's what our readers want to read. If you decide to address your personal history, I will present your words with the respect and care they deserve. If you choose not to, I will respect that boundary completely. This is your story to tell, on your timeline, in your way. Take whatever time you need to decide. Owen Pritchard. Ginny read the letter during breakfast and felt something settle in her chest. This was different from the prophet's aggressive questioning, from Witch Weekly's invasive nosiness. This was someone offering her agency, letting her choose what to reveal, rather than trying to extract it from her. You've decided something, Maeve observed. I can see it on your face. I think I want to do it. The full interview, including the personal stuff. Ginny folded the letter carefully. On my terms, with someone who won't sensationalize it. Just once, I want to tell the actual story instead of letting everyone else interpret it for me. That's brave, Rhiannon said quietly. Or stupid. I haven't decided which yet. Brave, Maeve corrected firmly. Definitely brave. Thursday afternoon, in Healer Angharad's sunny Cardiff office, Ginny laid out the situation and waited for professional guidance. The healer listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes on her parchment. When Ginny finished, Healer Angharad set down her quill and leaned back in her chair. Let me ask you something, Ginny. If you give this interview and address your past publicly, what do you hope will happen? I don't know. Maybe that people will finally see me as more than a victim. Maybe that the chanting will stop, or at least hurt less, because I've already acknowledged it myself. Ginny twisted her hands in her lap. Or maybe I just want to stop feeling like I'm hiding something, like my trauma is this shameful secret that everyone knows about, but I'm not allowed to discuss. And what's the worst that could happen? That it makes everything worse, that more people send hate mail, or the chanting gets worse, or that I'll say something wrong and it'll follow me forever. Those are valid fears. Healer Angharad nodded. Here's what I think. You're at a point in your healing where you're ready to reclaim your narrative. That's significant progress. But I want you to be very clear about your motivation. Are you doing this because you need to, or because you think it will make others treat you better? Ginny considered that. Both, maybe. I need to say it out, loud, to stop carrying it like a secret. But I also hope that being honest will make people see me differently. The first reason is a good one. The second is riskier, because you can't control how others respond. The healer leaned forward. If you give this interview, some people will be supportive. Some will be cruel. Some will ignore it completely. Your healing cannot depend on their reactions. Do you understand? Yes. So, can you live with the worst-case scenario? If this interview makes the harassment temporarily worse, if people use your words against you, if nothing changes, can you still feel good about having spoken your truth? Ginny thought about the chamber, about the diary, and Tom's voice, and the years she'd spent trying to pretend it hadn't broken something inside her. She thought about the Kenmare match, about hearing him again, about the terror of realizing she wasn't as healed as she'd hoped. And she thought about Ron's words, "You're not what he made you. You're what you chose to become after." "Yes," she said finally, "I think I can, because at least it will be my truth, in my words, not someone else's interpretation." Healer Angharad smiled. "Then I think you have your answer." The interview took place the following Tuesday in a quiet conference room at the Harpy's facility. Owen Pritchard was a middle-aged wizard with greying hair and observant eyes, carrying a worn leather bag full of parchment and self-inking quills. He shook Ginny's hand firmly and waited for her to settle into her chair before beginning. "Thank you for agreeing to this, Miss Weasley. Shall we start with Quidditch?" They spent an hour discussing tactics, Ginny's transition from seeker to chaser, her approach to reading defensive formations, her partnership with Rhiannon and Maeve, her thoughts on the evolution of professional chasing strategies. Pritchard asked intelligent questions and actually listened to her answers, following up with specifics that showed he'd done his research. It was, Ginny realized, with some surprise, actually enjoyable. Then Pritchard set down his quill and looked at her seriously. "I want to shift topics now, if you're comfortable. We can discuss the harassment you've faced this season, particularly regarding your personal history, or we can conclude the interview here. It's entirely your choice." Ginny took a deep breath. "Let's discuss it." "All right. Can you tell me, in your own words, what it's been like to have your past trauma become public fodder this season?" "It's been violating," Ginny said slowly, finding the words as she spoke them. "When I was 11, I was possessed by a fragment of Voldemort's soul that was hidden in an enchanted diary. It made me do terrible things, release a basilisk, write threatening messages in blood, almost die in the Chamber of Secrets. That experience was the worst thing that ever happened to me. It was traumatic and terrifying, and it took years to begin processing it." Pritchard nodded, his expression compassionate. "And now, strangers chant about it at matches. Journalists use it as clickbait. People reduce the most painful experience of my life to a footnote in someone else's story, usually my husband's or my family's, or just as proof that I'm damaged goods who shouldn't be playing professional Quidditch." Ginny's voice stayed steady. "They act like surviving possession should either make me superhuman or render me too broken to function. Neither is true. I'm just a person who went through something horrible and chose to keep living afterward. You've been seeing a mind healer, Pritchard said gently. Are you comfortable discussing that? Yes. I think it's important people know that seeking help is a sign of strength, not weakness. I started therapy a few weeks ago because I was having intrusive thoughts and flashbacks, especially in hostile environments like away matches. Working with healer Angharad has given me tools to manage that. I'm not cured. Trauma doesn't work that way. But I'm learning to cope with it in healthy ways instead of just trying to outfly it. Pritchard wrote carefully. What would you say to fans who participated in the harassment, the chanting, the cruel signs? Ginny met his eyes. I'd say you're hurting real people for your entertainment. I'm not a character in a story. I'm an actual human being who survived something traumatic. Mocking that doesn't make you clever or funny. It makes you cruel. And I hope someday you'll be ashamed of yourselves. Strong words. I'm done being polite about this. Ginny's voice was fierce now. For 3 years I've been quiet, trying not to make waves, trying to just move on and prove myself through my actions. But silence doesn't stop cruelty. It just lets it continue unchallenged. So yes, I'm speaking up. I'm saying what you're doing is wrong, it hurts, and I deserve better. And to those who say you only got your position because of your famous husband, watch me play and judge for yourself. My performance speaks louder than any defense I could offer. Ginny smiled slightly. Though for the record, Harry's proud of me. My teammates respect me. And Coach Jones wouldn't keep me on the roster if I wasn't earning my place. That's all that actually matters. Pritchard asked a few more questions about her support system, her goals for the rest of the season, her advice for young players dealing with similar scrutiny. Then he set down his quill and thanked her sincerely. This will run in our January issue. I'll send you the draft beforehand for your approval. If there's anything you want changed or removed, we'll honor that. Thank you, Ginny said, and meant it. That evening, Ginny sat in her room with her journal and wrote, I did it. I gave the interview. I told the truth about the chamber, about the harassment, about everything. And it felt good. Scary, but good. Like I finally took back something that was stolen from me. I don't know what will happen when it publishes. Maybe nothing will change. Maybe things will get worse before they get better. But at least I'll know I spoke up. I stopped letting other people define me by my trauma and defined myself instead. Healer Angharad was right. I can't control how people react, but I can control my own story. And today, I chose to tell it. That has to count for something. She closed the journal and looked out her window at the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, journalists were probably already working on their next invasive questions. Somewhere, hostile fans were preparing their next cruel chants. Somewhere, someone was judging her without knowing her, reducing her to headlines and gossip. But she'd spoken her truth, and that truth would stand, regardless of how others responded to it. It wasn't victory yet, but it was progress. And for tonight, that was enough. The article published on a frost-bright December morning, 2 days before the semi-final match against the Montrose Magpies. Ginny bought a copy of Seeker's Digest from the newsstand in Hogsmeade during a rare day off, her hands shaking slightly as she unrolled the magazine. Her photograph graced the cover, not a glamour shot or a candid that made her look vulnerable, but an action image of her mid-flight, quaffle tucked under her arm, face set with determination. The headline read simply, Ginny Weasley, Finding Her Own Sky. The interview inside was everything Pritchard had promised. He dedicated the first 2/3 to her Quidditch analysis, her tactical insights, her relationship with her teammates, her evolution as a chaser. The personal section came near the end, her words about the chamber and the harassment presented exactly as she'd spoken them, without embellishment or sensationalism. The final paragraph made her throat tight. Ginny Weasley is not defined by her trauma, her family, or her marriage. She is defined by her choice to keep flying, despite everything that tried to ground her. This season, she's proven herself to be one of the most promising chasers in professional Quidditch, not because of who she's connected to, but because of who she is. The sky, it seems, has been waiting for her all along. Well, Maeve appeared at her elbow, 2 butterbeers in hand. How bad is it? It's perfect, Ginny said quietly, accepting the butterbeer. He actually listened. He actually got it right. They sat on a bench outside the 3 broomsticks, watching Hogsmeade bustle with pre-holiday shopping. Students from Hogwarts wandered past in cheerful clusters. A few recognized Ginny and whispered excitedly, but no one approached. The morning felt peaceful in a way Ginny hadn't experienced in months. Her peace lasted until the evening prophet arrived. The sports section ran a response piece by Cordelia Thatch titled, Weasley's Complaints, Professional Athlete or Professional Victim. Ginny read the first paragraph and felt fury ignite in her chest. While one can sympathize with Miss Weasley's difficulties, one must also question whether a professional athlete who cannot handle public scrutiny belongs in professional sports. Her recent interview paints her as fragile and overly sensitive, hardly the qualities one expects from a Harpy. Ginny crumpled the paper and threw it across her room. It hit the wall and fell behind her desk, which was fine because she never wanted to see it again. The semi-final loomed. The Montrose Magpies were second in the league, known for their aggressive style and their star chaser, Isla MacLeod. No relation to the Harpies' reserve chaser Isla, though the coincidence of names had sparked endless confusion in sports coverage. Magpies' Isla was 32, a veteran of 8 seasons, and had a reputation for psychological warfare that rivaled her considerable flying skills. She'd also been making pointed comments about Ginny in press conferences all season. Looking forward to facing Weasley, she'd said, after the Magpies' quarter-final victory. Should be interesting to see if she can handle the pressure when it really matters. Some players are built for big moments. Others, well, we'll see. Another time. I'm sure she's very talented. Her family certainly has the Quidditch pedigree, though talent and legacy don't always translate to championship-level play. And most recently, mental health is important, of course. If Weasley needs to step away to focus on her personal struggles, no one would blame her. The game will still be here when she's ready. The comments were calculated to sound concerned while landing like hexes. Ginny tried to ignore them, but they burrowed under her skin like splinters. She's trying to get in your head before the match even starts, Rhiannon said during film review. Classic MacLeod strategy. She did the same thing to me 3 years ago, kept implying I was too old, too slow, past my prime. Then I outscored her 4 goals to 1, and she shut up. What if she's right, though? The words escaped before Ginny could stop them. What if I am too fragile for this? Then you wouldn't have made it this far. Jones didn't look up from her tactical notes. McLeod's scared of you, Weasley. That's why she's talking. Players who aren't threatened don't bother with psychological games. They just play. The fact that she's working this hard to undermine you means she knows you're dangerous. Ginny wanted to believe that. She tried to believe it as they ran through practice drills, as they reviewed the Magpies' defensive formations, as the day of the semi-final drew closer. The morning of the match, Harry sent a Patronus, a silver stag that bounded into her room just after dawn, speaking in his voice. You're going to be brilliant today. I love you. Try not to hex anyone, even if they deserve it. Ginny smiled despite her nerves and sent her own Patronus back, a horse that galloped away through the walls. No promises. See you after. The stadium was enormous, magically expanded to hold 15,000 spectators for the semi-final. The stands were split roughly evenly between Magpie supporters in black and white and Harpy's fans in emerald green. Ginny spotted her family in a section near the center. Harry, Ron, Hermione, her parents, even Charlie, who'd extended his visit specifically for this match. They waved when they saw her looking, and she felt something settle in her chest. She had people, real people who loved her, not because of what she'd survived or who she'd married, but because she was Ginny. That mattered more than anything Isla McLeod could say. The pre-match routine was familiar now, changing into her kit, checking her broom, listening to Jones's final tactical instructions. The Harpies gathered in a circle, hands clasped, and Rhiannon spoke quietly. This is what we've worked for all season. 12 matches, 10 wins. One more to reach the finals. We're faster than them, smarter than them, and we want it more. So let's go out there and prove it. Harpies, they shouted together, and the locker room rang with fierce determination. The roar of the crowd hit like a physical force as they flew onto the pitch. Ginny's heart hammered, but her hands were steady on her broom. She took her position, eyes on the quaffle held aloft by the referee, and waited. The whistle blew. The first 30 minutes were brutal. The Magpies played with calculated aggression, their beaters sending bludgers at the Harpies' chasers with ruthless precision. Isla McLeod was everywhere, intercepting passes, scoring goals, and somehow always positioning herself near Ginny with a running commentary designed to distract. Nice catch, Weasley. Your husband teach you that? Ginny ignored her and passed to Maeve, who scored. 2010, Harpies. Heard you're seeing a mind healer. That's sweet. Is she helping with the nightmares? Ginny's jaw clenched, but she stayed focused, catching Rhiannon's pass and dodging a bludger. She took a shot that the Magpie's keeper barely blocked. Must be hard, everyone knowing about your little incident. The whole possession thing. Do you ever wonder what else that Dark Lord left inside you? That one hit harder. Ginny fumbled her next catch and the quaffle went flying. A Magpie's chaser snatched it and scored. 2020. Jones's voice boomed from the sidelines. Weasley, ignore her. But Isla wasn't done. She flew close during the next play, her voice pitched low enough that only Ginny could hear. You know what I think. I think you're used goods, passed around by Dark Lords and boy who lived alike. Must be exhausting, always being someone else's story instead of having your own. Something inside Ginny snapped. But instead of the hot rage she expected, What flooded through her was ice-cold clarity. She looked at Isla MacLeod, this bitter, aging player, trying to claw her way to relevance by tearing down someone younger, and suddenly saw her clearly. Isla wasn't strong. She was desperate, and desperate people made mistakes. "You know what's exhausting?" Ginny said conversationally, intercepting a pass intended for Isla with casual grace. Listening to someone who peaked 5 years ago try to stay relevant by running their mouth instead of actually playing Quidditch. She shot toward goal, Isla scrambling to catch up. Ginny feinted left, went right, and sent the quaffle spiraling through the center hoop. 30-20, Harpies. "You want to talk about my past?" Ginny called over her shoulder, already flying back into position. "Fine. I survived possession by the most powerful dark wizard in history when I was 11 years old. I fought in a war. I watched people die. And I'm still here, still flying, still fighting. What have you survived, MacLeod? A few harsh reviews?" Isla's face flushed red. "You little." But Ginny was already gone, swooping under a bludger and catching a pass from Maeve. She could hear the crowd roaring, but it didn't sound threatening anymore. It sounded like fuel, like energy she could channel into pure determination. The next 20 minutes were a masterclass. Ginny flew like she had something to prove, which she did, but also like she had nothing to lose. She scored twice more. She assisted on 4 goals. She intercepted passes, blocked shots, and flew circles around Isla MacLeod until the veteran chaser looked clumsy by comparison. When Isla tried to physically knock Ginny off her broom during a scramble for the quaffle, a clear foul, Ginny simply rolled with the contact, came up steady, and caught the quaffle that bounced free. The referee's whistle shrieked. Penalty shot for the Harpies. Rhiannon took the penalty and scored with ruthless precision. 140-90, Harpies leading. Isla flew past Ginny during the reset, her voice low and vicious. "You think you're special? You think surviving makes you better than me? You're nothing but a victim who learned to fly. And everyone knows it." Ginny turned to face her fully, hovering at center pitch. "You're right about one thing. I am a survivor. And you know what that means? It means I've already faced the worst thing that could happen to me and come out the other side. You're just a bitter player watching her career end while mine is beginning. That must be hard." She flew away before Isla could respond, leaving the older woman shaking with rage at midfield. The match continued. The Magpies rallied briefly, their chasers scoring twice in quick succession. But the Harpies were relentless, their formation tight and efficient. Maeve scored. Rhiannon scored. Ginny assisted on both, her passes threaded through impossible gaps in the Magpies' defense. And then, at 210-160, Seren caught the snitch. The stadium exploded. The Harpies had won. They were going to the finals. Ginny landed, her legs shaking from exhaustion and adrenaline. Her teammates swarmed her, Maeve lifting her off her feet, Rhiannon ruffling her hair, even the twins cheering. Jones was shouting something about tactical brilliance, but Ginny couldn't hear over the roar of celebration. She looked up and found Isla MacLeod watching from across the pitch. The veteran chaser looked diminished somehow, smaller than she had at the match's start. Their eyes met briefly, and Ginny saw something flicker in Isla's expression. Not quite shame, but close. Recognition, maybe. The acknowledgement that she'd been beaten, and badly. Ginny turned away. Isla MacLeod didn't deserve her anger or her pity. She was just another obstacle Ginny had flown past on her way to something better. The post-match press conference was chaotic. Journalists shouted questions, cameras flashed, and Jones fielded most of them with her typical gruff efficiency. But one reporter, not Thatch, thankfully, someone Ginny didn't recognize, asked specifically about the confrontation with Isla MacLeod. "Miss Weasley, there seemed to be some tension between you and Isla MacLeod during the match. Can you comment on that?" Ginny considered her answer carefully. She could be diplomatic, could brush it off, or she could be honest. "Isla MacLeod is a talented player," Ginny said slowly, "but she tried to use my personal trauma as a weapon to distract me during the match. That's not gamesmanship. That's cruelty, and I won't apologize for refusing to accept it." Did she specifically reference, "I'm not repeating what she said. It doesn't deserve to be repeated"? Ginny's voice was steady. "What I will say is this. I've spent years being ashamed of what happened to me, letting it define me, letting other people use it to diminish me. But I survived something impossible, and I'm done apologizing for it. My past doesn't make me weak. It makes me strong. And anyone who can't see that isn't worth my time." The room went quiet for a moment. Then someone started clapping. One of the photographers, a young witch with ink-stained fingers. Others joined in, and suddenly half the press room was applauding. Cordelia Thatch sat in the front row, her quill frozen above her parchment, looking like she'd swallowed something sour. Ginny smiled. That night, back at the Harpy's facility, Ginny stood alone on the pitch under the stars. Her body ached pleasantly from the match. Her mind felt clearer than it had in months. She thought about Tom Riddle's voice, which she hadn't heard during the match, despite Isla's provocations. She thought about the chamber, about the diary, about all the years she'd spent running from that memory, and she realized she wasn't running anymore. She'd faced her worst fear today, someone using her trauma as a weapon, and she'd won anyway. Not just the match, but the battle with her own shame, her own doubt. Tom Riddle didn't own her story anymore. Neither did Isla MacLeod, or Cordelia Thatch, or anyone else who tried to reduce her to her worst moments. The story was hers, and she was just beginning to write it. The final match was scheduled for the first Saturday in January, giving the Harpies 3 weeks to prepare. 3 weeks that passed in a blur of tactical sessions, practice matches, physical training, and mounting anticipation that felt like electricity in the air. Their opponents were the Tuchil Tornadoes, first in the league and defending champions for the past 2 years. They were fast, disciplined, and ruthlessly efficient. Their seeker had caught the snitch in under 20 minutes in 4 separate matches this season. Their chasers moved like a single organism, their passing so fluid it seemed choreographed. "They're beatable," Joan said during a strategy meeting, her tone suggesting she was trying to convince herself as much as the team. "But we'll need perfect execution. No mistakes, no hesitation, and absolutely no letting them get in your heads." The pressure was immense. The Prophet ran daily coverage counting down to the match. Witch Weekly published a special issue featuring all the players, complete with embarrassing childhood photographs and speculation about their personal lives. Even the Seeker's Digest ran tactical breakdowns analyzing every possible outcome. Ginny tried to ignore most of it. She focused on training, on her sessions with healer Angharad, on the small rituals that kept her grounded, breakfast with her teammates, evening flights alone on the pitch, letters to Harry and her family. The response to her semi-final comments about Isla MacLeod had been mixed. Some journalists praised her honesty. Others criticized her for being unprofessional or too emotional. Cordelia Thatch wrote a particularly nasty piece suggesting Ginny was playing the victim card for sympathy. But there were letters too, dozens of them, arriving by owl every morning. Young witches writing to say they'd survived terrible things, and Ginny's words made them feel less alone. Older witches sharing their own stories of trauma and recovery. Even a few wizards writing to say they'd never considered how damaging it was to mock someone's pain until they'd heard Ginny speak about it. Ginny kept every letter in a box under her bed. On days when the doubt crept back in, she'd read through them and remember why she'd spoken up in the first place. The week before the final, her family descended on the training facility like a cheerful invasion. Molly brought enough food to feed both teams twice over, refusing to believe the house elves were adequately nourishing her daughter. Arthur wanted a complete tour of the broom maintenance facilities. Ron and Harry challenged Ginny to a 3-on-3 practice match that ended with everyone laughing and covered in mud. Even Percy showed up, bringing an exhaustively detailed statistical analysis of the tornado's weaknesses that was actually somewhat useful. "You've got this," Ron said on their last evening. Together, sitting beside Ginny under the now familiar apple tree outside the facility. "You know that, right? You've already won the hard part." "The hard part is the actual final match, Ron." "No. The hard part was surviving everything that tried to break you and choosing to keep flying anyway. The match is just Quidditch." He nudged her shoulder. "You've got your whole family coming to watch. Harry's taking the day off work. Said Kingsley himself couldn't make him miss this. Mum's been knitting you a good luck jumper, which you'll have to wear at least once, or she'll be devastated. And I've bet George 50 galleons you'll score at least 3 goals. So please, don't make me lose money to that git." Ginny laughed despite her nerves. 3 goals? That's all you're betting on? I'd bet higher, but George knows you too well. He said 5. Tell George he's right. The morning of the final dawned clear and cold. The sky that particular brilliant blue that promised perfect flying weather. Ginny woke before sunrise, too nervous to sleep, and found she wasn't alone. Maeve and Rhiannon were already in the dining hall, picking at breakfast and looking as anxious as Ginny felt. "Couldn't sleep?" Maeve asked. "Not a chance." Ginny poured herself tea with hands that only trembled slightly. "You?" "I've played in 4 finals," Rhiannon said. "Lost 3, won 1. Every time, I'm convinced I'll vomit before the opening whistle. Every time, I don't. But I'm always convinced." Jones appeared, looking like she hadn't slept at all. "Right. Team meeting in 20 minutes. Everyone present, no exceptions. Move." The meeting was brief, but intense. Jones reviewed their strategy one final time, emphasized key matchups, and then looked at each of them in turn. "I've coached this team for 8 years. I've seen players come and go, seasons won and lost. This team, you lot, you're something special. Not because you're the most talented I've ever coached, though you're certainly up there. You're special because you've chosen to be a team in the truest sense. You've supported each other, pushed each other, refused to let outside pressure tear you apart. She paused, and Ginny could have sworn her eyes were damp. Whatever happens today, I'm proud of you. Now get out there and show the tornadoes what harpies are made of. The stadium was a cauldron of noise and color. 20,000 spectators, the largest crowd Ginny had ever played before, packed the magically expanded stands. The tornado's supporters waved blue and sky blue banners. The Harpies fans answered with emerald green and gold, and scattered throughout, Ginny spotted familiar faces. There, her parents, sitting with Bill and Fleur and little Victoire. There, Ron and Hermione. Ron already shouting encouragement, despite the match not having started. There, Charlie, George, and even Percy, waving a banner that read Weasley's Wonders, which was both embarrassing and touching. And there, in a section close to the pitch, Harry. He met her eyes across the distance and pressed his hand to his heart. She did the same. Luna was there too, Ginny realized with surprise, sitting with Neville and wearing a hat shaped like a harpy's head. Even Hagrid had made the journey, his massive form unmistakable in the stands. All these people, all of them here for her, supporting her, believing in her. The weight of it should have been crushing. Instead, it felt like wings. The pre-match routine passed in a daze. The flight onto the pitch, the referee's instructions, the handshake with the Tornado's captain that was firm but not hostile, and then the wait, hovering at center pitch with her teammates, watching the referee prepare to release the quaffle. Ginny looked around the pitch, at the 3 golden hoops rising against the blue sky, at her teammates in their emerald robes, at the crowd that seemed to pulse with anticipation. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the chamber, the war, the diary and Tom's voice, and all the years she'd spent running from her own shadow. And she thought about what Rhiannon had said weeks ago. You're not what he made you. You're what you chose to become after. She'd chosen this. Chosen to fly, to fight, to refuse to be defined by her worst moments. And whatever happened in the next few hours, that choice mattered. The whistle blew. The match was everything Ginny had feared and hoped for. Fast, brutal, breathtaking. The Tornadoes were as good as advertised. Their chasers moving in perfect synchronization. Their beaters defending their space with aggressive precision. But the Harpies were ready. Rhiannon scored first. A beautiful long shot that sailed through the center hoop, while the Tornado's keeper was out of position. 10-0 Harpies. The crowd roared. The Tornadoes answered immediately. Their star chaser, a witch named Verity, who'd been playing professionally for a decade, scoring twice in rapid succession. 2010 Tornadoes. The match settled into a rhythm after that, both teams trading goals, neither able to pull decisively ahead. Ginny scored once, threading the quaffle through an impossible gap in the Tornadoes' defense. Maeve scored twice, but the Tornadoes matched them goal for goal. At 90-90, with both seekers circling high above in search of the snitch, Ginny found herself face-to-face with Verity during a scramble for the quaffle. "You're better than I expected," Verity said, not unkindly. "Thought you'd be all hype, but you can actually play." "Thanks," Ginny said, surprised. "You're terrifying." Verity laughed, and they both dove for the quaffle, which Ginny caught by centimeters. She passed to Rhiannon, who scored 100-90 Harpies. The next hour blurred together, goals and saves and near misses, bludgers screaming past, the crowd's roar rising and falling like waves. Ginny's world narrowed to the immediate, the weight of the quaffle in her hands, the position of her teammates, the gap in the defense she could exploit. She didn't hear Tom Riddle's voice. She didn't flash back to the chamber. She was simply, completely present. And 190 to 180, Harpies leading by a single goal. Both seekers suddenly dove. The crowd's noise reached a fever pitch. Ginny watched from her position at midfield as Seren and the Tornado seeker plummeted toward the ground in parallel spirals, both reaching for something invisible. Seren pulled up at the last second, arm extended, and the sunlight caught on something tiny and golden clutched in her fist. The snitch. The stadium exploded. The Harpies had won. They'd won the cup. Ginny felt her teammates crash into her. Maeve and Rhiannon and all of them, screaming and crying and laughing. Jones was on the pitch somehow, hugging everyone within reach. Even the Tornadoes were applauding, gracious in defeat. The cup itself was presented by a ministry official, Ginny barely registered. She held it with her teammates, feeling the cool metal under her hands, and thought, "We did it. We actually did it." The victory lap was surreal. Flying around the pitch with the cup held high, the crowd chanting, "Harpies, Harpies," over and over until the word lost meaning and became pure sound. Ginny saw her family in the stands, jumping and cheering, saw Harry with tears on his face, grinning wider than she'd ever seen, saw Luna waving her Harpy hat wildly, and when she landed, when the press surged forward with their cameras and questions, when Jones gave her victory speech and the team posed for official photographs, Ginny felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not the absence of pain or fear or doubt, but the presence of something stronger, certainty. Certainty that she'd made the right choice, that she'd fought for this and earned it, that she belonged here, in the sky, with her team, living the life she'd chosen. The celebration lasted well into the night. The locker room was chaos, champagne and laughter and someone's attempt to sing the Harpies' fight song that dissolved into giggles. Jones appeared briefly with more champagne and tears in her eyes, told them they were magnificent, and disappeared again. Eventually, the team dispersed to their various celebrations. Ginny found her family waiting outside the stadium, and they swept her up in a group hug so tight she could barely breathe. "That was brilliant," Ron shouted. "Absolutely brilliant. You scored 4 goals. I won my bet with George." "We're so proud of you," Molly said, crying openly. So proud. Arthur just hugged her, wordless. Harry waited until the family chaos subsided slightly, then pulled her aside. They walked a little distance from the others, just far enough for relative privacy. "You did it," he said softly. "You really did it. We did it. The team." "No." Harry cupped her face in his hands. "You did this. You survived everything that tried to break you, and you flew anyway. You faced down your trauma, your critics, your own doubts, and you won. Not just the cup, though that's brilliant, but you won yourself back. That's what matters." Ginny felt tears prickle her eyes. I couldn't hear him today. Tom, during the match. Usually there's always this whisper in the back of my head, but today there was nothing, just me and the sky. "Good." Harry kissed her forehead. "That's how it should be, just you and the sky." Later, much later, after the family celebrations and the team party and all the chaos, Ginny found herself back at the stadium. It was past midnight, the stands empty, the pitch quiet under a blanket of stars. She walked to center field and stood there, remembering the opening whistle, the goals, the moment Seren caught the snitch. the weight of the cup in her hands, but also the chamber, the diary, Tom's voice, the years of fear and shame and running. All of it had led here, to this moment, this victory, this peace. Ginny pulled out her journal. She'd been carrying it in her robes all day, a talisman, and wrote by one light, "Today I won a Quidditch championship. But more importantly, today I finally stopped running from my past and started flying toward my future. Tom Riddle tried to destroy me when I was 11 years old. He failed. And every day I choose to keep living, keep flying, keep fighting. That's another victory over everything he represented. I'm not the girl who was possessed anymore. I'm not Potter's wife or the sixth Weasley child or any of the other labels people try to pin on me. I'm Ginny Weasley, chaser for the Holyhead Harpies, survivor of impossible things, daughter and sister and wife and friend. And I'm free." She closed the journal and looked up at the stars. The sky stretched endlessly above her, vast and beautiful and waiting. Tomorrow there would be press conferences and celebrations and planning for next season. Tomorrow she'd start the work of maintaining what she'd built, of continuing to heal, of proving herself all over again. But tonight, standing alone in an empty stadium with the memory of victory still singing in her blood, Ginny let herself simply be, present, whole, free. She smiled at the stars, and the sky smiled back. And for the first time in years, maybe for the first time ever, Ginny Weasley felt like she was exactly where she belonged.